Death comes, as it must to all men, to Joseph Stalin on March the 5th, 1953, in his 74th year. His nation is plunged into mourning. Stalin had seemed immortal. His body is brought to the mausoleum, the great burial vault on Red Square, sanctum sanctorum of the communist world, and placed next to the body of Lenin, founder of the party and the state. 8 years later, on a rainy October night, Stalin's body is secretly removed from its sarcophagus, placed in a rough wooden box, taken to a newly dug grave by the Kremlin wall, and hastily reburied without ceremony. This man who left so great a footprint on 20th century history, can he be explained? Averil Harriman, U.S. Ambassador to the Soviet Union.
Stalin remains for me the most incomprehensible, mysterious, and controversial personality of all those I have known.
In the Republic of Georgia, beneath the towering snow peaks, in the town of Gori, stands the last remaining monument to Joseph Stalin. A pavilion shelters the little house where he was born. In this room and bed. In the Georgia of 1879, an outlying province of the Russian Empire, whose warm, rustic simplicity is preserved in the paintings of Nico Pirosmani. Like the woman pictured here, Stalin's mother has borne 3 sons. Only Joseph survives infancy. Stalin's mother is a laundress on the estate of the wealthy merchant Ignatashvili. Her husband, Vissarion Djugashvili, is a cobbler. He's also a drunk and a wife and child beater. Vissarion Djugashvili vanishes one day. In later years, this photo is displayed in the Gori Museum as that of Stalin's father. Sent to Stalin for confirmation, it is not returned. Rumor has it that Stalin's actual father is his mother's employer, Ignatashvili. Village gossips also credit a general and a member of the Tsar's family. Both have been dinner guests of Ignatashvili. Young Joseph, his mother a scarlet woman, his parentage in doubt, is taunted by other children and shunned by the village. It twists and hardens him. Later, Stalin will be pictured as a loving son, but will keep his mother hidden in this house. Her walls hung with cherished photographs. Her life carefully monitored. You old whore will be one of Stalin's names for her. When his mother dies, Stalin will send Lavrenti Beria, head of his secret police, to represent him. Beria's men will act as mourners at her funeral. She had wanted her son to become a priest. Young Stalin attends church school, his tuition revealingly paid for by Ignatashvili. Then theological seminary at the Georgian capital, Tiflis. At the seminary, he is best remembered as a singularly unattractive young man, with a gift for intrigue and anarchy. To the relief of church authorities, he drops out. Stalin has other plans. He evolves himself from a student of theology to a student of Marxism, and then to a revolutionary. He takes the alias Koba. Koba, Stalin's boyhood idol, was a Georgian Robin Hood. Stalin will interpret him loosely. As Koba, Stalin's performance in revolutionary circles falls short of nobility. Anton Antonov Ovseyenko, historian and son of a famous revolutionary.
Stalin, as a provocateur, organized revolutionary cells and worked in underground newspapers, provoking disputes. Examining his documents closely, one is struck by the thought, he must have been a provocateur.
Soon, all of these revolutionaries are arrested by the secret police. All except Koba. Suspected of treachery, Koba flees to the seaside town of Batumi. There he organizes a mob attack on the prison. The crowd is dispersed. Some are killed. The ringleaders are arrested. Again, all but Koba. Finally, Koba is arrested. Entered on his police record is his former name, Joseph Vissarionovich Djugashvili, and his birth date, 21st of December, 1879. But oddly, his birth certificate and his school graduation certificate disagree. They show his birth date as the 6th of December, 1878. It would seem that things are not altogether ethical regarding the young man known as Koba. Vladislav Lord Kifanedze.
I came across an article in the British newspaper Daily Mirror, dated November the 2nd, 1966. The author was George Kennan, an American diplomat and writer, who was for some time the United States ambassador to the Soviet Union. Kennan established beyond question that the passport used by Joseph Djugashvili for leaving the country to attend the party conference in Stockholm in 1906 was issued by the Tsarist secret police. Kennan also established that at one of the party meetings in the year 1920, Stalin admitted collaboration with the Tsarist secret police. Later, Kennan traced the fate of each person in that meeting and found that all were liquidated in the 1920s, perhaps for knowing too much. It seems obvious during that period of his life he had been involved with the Tsarist secret police, but later was to cut his ties with them.
The secret police have created a second identity to shield Koba from exposure. Koba gives them information. They pay and protect him. And for Koba, it is a useful means of eliminating his rivals. Thereafter, Stalin's official birth date will be the one chosen for him by the Tsar's secret police. Koba is an energetic revolutionary. He writes for underground newspapers, and to fund the cause, he robs banks. Some of his loot he sends abroad to Lenin, who heads the Russian Marxist movement. Later, as Stalin, Koba will liquidate his fellow bank robbers. 6 times he is imprisoned and escapes from places of exile in the north or Siberia. In exile, Koba undergoes a second mutation. He becomes Stalin, Joseph Stalin, man of steel. But fellow convicts, like Aram Ivanyan, remember him not as Stalin, but as Koba. They mustn't live to tell the tale. In time, Stalin will have Ivanyan tortured and then silenced for knowing Koba. Aram Ivanyan's daughter, Lutseta, remembers with horror a visit to her father in prison.
Well, I was struck dumb. We were given 10 minutes only, and Mother had a talk with him. I said nothing. The only thing he asked my mother for was my photograph. And it was in my school briefcase. So I opened it and handed the photo to Father. When I looked at his hand, I saw that it was all disfigured, without a single fingernail.
We learned that on the 21st of December, my father was executed here in prison. Well, Mother was arrested too, as a member of the family of a traitor to the motherland. She received 8 years in prison without the right of correspondence. Well, this is how things were.
The pattern emerges for Joseph Vissarionovich Djugashvili. Become Koba. Become Stalin. To create for himself a new identity, it is necessary for him to murder his personal past. He begins in earnest with his family. Irina Yenukidze, niece of Avel Yenukidze, an important party leader, recalls hearing Stalin's credo.
We had been invited to dinner at the Kremlin by Stalin. I don't remember on what occasion. It was some sort of little festival. We were sitting at the table and talking about the traits of character that the true Bolshevik should develop. And Stalin said, the true Bolshevik cannot and should not have a family, because he must give himself wholly to his work, to the party which he is serving.
Keto, Stalin's first wife, is from a traditional, close-knit Georgian family. The honeymoon is soon over.
And how did he treat his first wife, Keto Svanidze? An old worker in whose apartment Stalin was staying in 1930 said that when his first wife was pregnant, Stalin threw her on the floor and kicked the wretched woman, and her in the family way. He kicked her, yes, kicked her with his boots on. And the old worker, shaking his head in disgust, said, "Just think whom we've taken to be our leader."
Keto, it is said, dies of typhoid, leaving a son. Ignored by Stalin, Keto's boy is raised by her family. Stalin's second wife is a daughter of the revolutionary Alleluyev. Stalin has known Nadia since her childhood. It was put about that the beautiful Nadia fell madly in love with the romantic young revolutionary. But the evidence suggests otherwise.
Имеется свидетельство Анны Сергеевны Аллилуевой, сестры Надежды, которая рассказывает, что в 1900...
There is evidence given by Anna Alliluyeva, Nadia's sister, who tells that in 1918, when Stalin was on a train to Tsaritsyn, traveling with him was Nadia Alliluyeva, who had worked before in Lenin's office. She was with her father. At night, Nadia's father was awakened by a terrible cry. He rushed to her compartment and knocked. The door flew open, and he saw his daughter and Stalin in quite a compromising position. The daughter fell on her father's neck. "He has raped me, father." The father snatched out his revolver. Revolutionaries during the Civil War never parted with their revolvers. But Stalin fell to his knees before him, saying, "I love her. Don't shoot. We'll get married, only don't shoot." Well, what could her father do? He gave in, and the wedding soon took place.
Nadia bears a son, Vasily. and a daughter, Svetlana. Still, Stalin insists that a revolutionary should be a lone wolf. Irina Yenokidze recalls an argument.
And my father said to him, "Joseph, what about you? And what about me?" "Why me?" Stalin said. "What do you mean? I have no family." "Well, whose children are these?" my father said. "No, these are not my children." Stalin said, "These are her children." And he poked his finger into Nadia's face. I saw her cover her eyes with her hands and leave the room. But we were already used to her being always in tears because of his violent bullying. When a friend and I recalled this talk, she told me, "Irina, he jabbed his finger in her eye, and she walked around with a red eye for days after that."
In Stalin's apartment in November 1932, Nadia is found dead. The widow of Stalin's colleague, Nikolai Bukharin.
There was a banquet on the occasion of the October Revolution anniversary. Stalin came with Nadia. He drank a little and began throwing around cigarette butts and bits of orange peel. Then he swore at her, said terrible things. She got up and left the room. And in the morning, so my husband told me, she was found dead by the nurse. At the funeral, Stalin came up to my husband and said, "Just think, after the banquet, I didn't go to the apartment, I went to the villa. And in the morning they phoned and told me that Nadia was no more." It is difficult to say what actually happened, but I don't exclude the possibility that he could have, well...
Утром позвонили, что Надя не стала. Трудно сказать, как это было, я не исключаю, что он мог ее...
Actress Anna Petrushanskaya was on friendly terms with Boris Zbarsky, a Kremlin physician.
I said, "Look here, was this monster at least shocked by the murder of his wife?" Boris said, "No, he wanted to tell me that she killed herself, that it was suicide. How could it have happened that Alliluyeva, Nadia, shot herself?" I said. "She didn't," he said. "She was shot." I said, "How could it be? It can't be." Boris said, "Anna, I was in the Kremlin at that time, and I was the first person to enter the room. She was lying with a small pillow in her right hand. It was all covered with blood. She must have been defending herself with it." I said, "Boris, could it be..." I lost the use of my tongue. "So, Boris, it's him."
The wife of Soviet Premier Molotov is a confidant of Nadia's. After the quarrel, she catches up with Nadia, and they stroll outside Stalin's apartment. Nadia is calm. She speaks of her children, her future plans. Then she enters. The official announcement states that Stalin's wife has died from appendicitis. Stalin places a comradely inscription on her gravestone. Nadezhda Alliluyeva Stalina, member of the Bolshevik Party, from Stalin. As usual, Stalin leaves few witnesses to the dark side of his past. And Nadia's family are witnesses. First to go is Nadia's younger brother, Pavel. Kira is Pavel's daughter.
Before they arrested us, all of Father's friends had been jailed, and he would say to Stalin, "You will jail me too, because these are my friends."
Pavel dies mysteriously. The doctor calls it poison. Stalin accuses Pavel's wife. The secret police come for her.
I suddenly rushed up to her and embraced her, but she ran away. Later, when she came back, I asked her, "Mother, why did you run away from me?" She answered, "You know, daughter, I was about to throw myself down the stairwell." I call on Mother's acquaintances and they say, "You shouldn't visit us or they will jail us too." And later, I find out they have been arrested. Now I call on some other friends of Mother's, and again I hear the same request. "You shouldn't appear at our place, otherwise we'll be arrested." And they are arrested too. I stopped going to see people.
Soon, it is Kira's turn.
They put me into a cell, having no windows, no door. They locked me in there, and it was dark, no light whatever. I remember that much, no light at all there. I began to choke, maybe out of fear, or it was simply terror.
Next to go is Nadia's older sister, Anna. Her husband is arrested and executed. Terrified, Anna makes herself invisible, hoping to escape Stalin's attention, but she blunders.
Her blunder was to publish a book in 1948 of recollections that was very much disliked by the leader. He was depicted as a common, simple mortal, but of course he was already the great one, the genius, the teacher of the nation, and so on. And suddenly this kind of book. Of course he disliked it intensely. Anna happened to sit at his table, and he flung the words to Beria, "Remove this old fool."
And Stalin's secret police chief removes her to prison. Stalin's son, Vasily, an Air Force general, eavesdrops on his aunt's interrogation. Alexander Aliluyev is Vasily's cousin.
You see, he was present in the next room when Anna was being examined. They kept her standing 10 or 12 hours. They know how to do it. And she felt bad in all senses of the word. Vasily heard all this and, laughing ironically, told his wife about it. And she told the horrible story to her grandmother.
When Anna is released, after 8 years of solitary confinement, she is insane. Stalin now turns on the family of his first wife, Keto, beginning with Keto's brother, Alexander, and his wife.
We all lived happily together until 1937. Then Svanidze was arrested, Maria Anisimovna too. And by some trick, she sent a note to my mother saying how badly they were being treated and asking her to plead for them before Stalin. So Mother went to Stalin, and he told her first and foremost that she should never take upon herself such a mission in the future. And he must have said it very firmly. As for Maria's note, he kept it for himself. Mother learned later that they had sent Maria to some godforsaken place where she very soon died.
Alexander is told that Stalin will pardon him if he begs for his life. He spits in the face of his executioner. Hearing this, Stalin remarks, "My, what a proud fellow." Yakov, Stalin's eldest son, is despised by his father.
One day he drove Yakov out of the Kremlin with no clothes on. Imagine! He ran to our house stark naked. It was winter, freezing hard, and he had been running along the street like that. He said, whenever I met someone, I hid myself for fear of being arrested. He couldn't stand that kind of treatment, being constantly accused of something. Do you know, at one point he tried to shoot himself?
My husband witnessed an episode when they called Stalin from the hospital to say that Yakov had tried to commit suicide and the bullet had struck him in the stomach. But Stalin said, this is his affair. If he wants to live, let him live. If he wants to die, let him die.
What was so terrible was not the fact that Yakov tried to shoot himself, but that his father ridiculed him, saying, "You can't even shoot yourself."
The war comes to Yakov as a means of escape. But his fate at Nazi hands is no better. The ill-fated Yakov is acutely battle-shocked. Then captured and imprisoned with hundreds of thousands of his countrymen. The Germans offer to ransom Yakov, but Stalin refuses. "I have no Soviet prisoners, only traitors," Stalin proclaims. Yakov throws himself on the barbed wire and dies. As the wife of a traitor, Yakov's young widow is arrested and imprisoned. With Stalin for a friend, no one needs an enemy. Mortality runs high among his companions.
He contrived, I can't find a better name for it, a process of anti-intellectual extermination among his apparent friends.
He knew that in both appearance and intellect, he was their inferior, and this became his obsession. All of you are so polished, so handsome, so educated, and I'm not, so I'm going to destroy you.
First to go among Stalin's friends is Mikhail Frunze, a Civil War hero. Handsome and charming, he eclipses Stalin.
Of course, Frunze was like a thorn in Stalin's flesh. He would have destroyed Frunze in any case, perhaps in a car accident.
Stalin's technique is masterful. He insists, solicitously, that Frunze have surgery for his stomach ulcer. Viktor Malkin, son of Stalin's physician.
Frunze didn't want to be operated on. He told his wife that he felt entirely well, but Stalin insisted that Frunze should rid himself of his ulcer, that surgery was just what he needed. So the operation was performed, and it was immediately clear that there was no ulcer, just some old scars. That's why it lasted only 35 minutes.
After the operation, Stalin calls on his friend at the hospital and leaves this note. "Dear chum, at 5 this afternoon, Mikoyan and I dropped in for a visit, but Dr. Rozanov wouldn't let us in to see you, the rascal. You mustn't feel lonely, old pal, because we will be back again soon. Greetings, Koba." 40 hours later, Frunze leaves the hospital as a corpse. As Frunze's coffin is lowered, Stalin remarks, "May all of my old friends sink into the grave this gently and simply." Stalin and Sergo Orjonikidze seem devoted friends. But one day, in the Kremlin, enlightenment comes to Orjonikidze. He storms into Stalin's office, the Holy of Holies, seeking Stalin.
Sergo Orjonikidze began shouting and accusing Stalin of ruining the country, saying that he was shooting the best people. When Stalin took offense, when he raised an objection to some point trying to shout Orjonikidze down, the latter couldn't stand it. He was very excitable by nature. He grabbed Stalin and threw him on the floor, and while Stalin was trying to get to his feet, he ran from the room, slamming the door. Some time passed, then a plainclothes man paid him a visit and said, "Please, make your own arrangements. Otherwise, they will be here to get you in half an hour."
The Kremlin announces that Sergo has shot himself, but 30 years later, his wife reveals the truth.
Some people led by a Georgian rushed into Sergo's apartment, into his study. There was a loud argument, and I heard a shot. It was fired by the chief of Sergo's own bodyguards. It was murder, not suicide.
Pravda reports that Orjonikidze has died of heart paralysis. Avel Yenukidze is not simply Stalin's friend and confidant. As Nadia's godfather, he considers Stalin's family his own. Everyone knows that only Avel can contradict Stalin and live.
Avel wrote a booklet about the history of the Transcaucasian political underground. Because Stalin hadn't taken part in the events described, his name wasn't mentioned by the author. Stalin was enraged by this. So, of course, he decided to get rid of Avel. He warned, "He who is not with me is against me." He didn't dare do away with Avel at once, without any preparation. Oh, no, never that way. He was too cunning. Stalin knew very well how to cover his tracks.
For crossing Stalin, Yanukidze is framed, then executed. Stalin's inner circle, the men who have risen through the ranks with him, are called the Stalin milieu. Among them is Mikhail Kalinin, president of the Soviet Union, who now does odd jobs for Stalin, presenting medals and signing arrest warrants. He is thought to be a loving husband and father.
When I was arrested, I was sent to the Pinishsky camp, a terrible camp. When we got there, I met Katerina Ivanovna, Kalinin's wife, and I said to her, "But you, the wife of the president, why are you here?" And she said, "You know, Anna, at one of those midnight suppers of the mustached one, he behaved disgracefully. He had too much to drink. The company was much as you'd expect. Suddenly, he began to abuse my husband, Mikhail, in a vile way. Well, I suddenly snapped. I told him everything. I told him what I really thought of him. He caught hold of the edge of the tablecloth, but didn't pull it off as he usually did in his rages. He stared intently at me. Everybody was silent. Mikhail went white with terror. 2 days later, I was arrested. Mikhail groveled before Stalin, but in vain.
Before Kalinin dies, Stalin mellows and frees his wife in time for his funeral. Her dead husband had signed her arrest warrant on Stalin's orders. Now she faces her tormentor. He ignores her.
I saw her walking after the coffin of her husband. She was walking with the others, next but one to Stalin. He was very sad looking. So sad. She hated him with all of her heart and soul.
The wife of Molotov, the nation's second most powerful man, is sent to the gulags. Molotov is too frightened to protest. Stalin's most devoted aide is his private secretary, General Poskryobyshev. He sits at this desk by Stalin's door like a faithful dog on a chain.
After Stalin's death, many people asked Poskryobyshev why he didn't write his memoirs, and he would answer, "What would you like me to write, friend? How Stalin used to pour out ink from his inkstand onto his colossal desk, then grab me by the back of the neck and shove my face into spreading ink?" Telling this, he would burst into drunken tears.
Then the wife of Poskryobyshev is arrested.
As Klyobyshev rushed to his master and seeing the implacable look on his face, groveled at Stalin's feet, imploring him to free his wife. But Stalin, quietly puffing at his pipe, told him, "Don't worry, Sasha, calm yourself. What good is that wife to you? We'll get another wife for you, one that will obey you."
Twice widowed, estranged from his mother, his sons, and his friends, Stalin seems incapable of intimacy. Nonetheless, it is rumored that his fondness for opera and ballet has led to numerous liaisons with prima donnas and ballerinas. In one instance, to a proposal of marriage, causing a frightened soprano to bolt Moscow and take cover in a distant province. It is unlikely that Stalin is aloof from sex. Power is an aphrodisiac that makes the crudest men attractive. Stalin's amours, like so many of his secrets, will be buried with him. Behind his public image of austerity, Stalin privately enjoys the good life. Summoned to one of Stalin's country villas, or this secluded forest lodge, these otherwise formidable men drop everything and brace themselves for a night of clowning and carousing with their leader. A wink from Stalin, and Khrushchev capers and sings. Stalin puts tomatoes on Mikoyan's chair. Mikoyan takes spare trousers. Stalin's dirty jokes evoke gales of laughter. At dawn, the guests are driven home, dead drunk. At 70, Stalin shows signs of senility. State funerals bore him. He has difficulty staying awake in meetings and thinks Molotov is a British spy. He decorates his walls with pictures of happy children, which he clips from magazines. His own children have been the envy of millions of Soviet children less fortunate. How wonderful it would be to take the place of Svetlana or Vasily in the home of the nation's father. After Stalin's death, Vasily is placed in a mental asylum and dies of alcoholism. Svetlana's name is celebrated by poets, given to sanatoriums, and even to a pencil factory. But after her father's death, she secretly leaves the USSR, changes her name, and marries several times, moving from Britain to India to America and back, as if fleeing some demon. Stalin also flees at night, from room to room, like some restless animal, never sleeping in the same place twice.
One must ask the following question about Stalin. Was he mentally normal or not? You see, the notion of mental disease is relative. There is a borderline between sanity and insanity. A person may possess some elements of each. I'm sure that Stalin was partly insane.
Vladimir Bechterev, a world-famous scientist, had diagnosed Stalin in the 20s.
Bechterev visited Stalin in his private office. In the waiting room were some people and secretaries. He came back into the study after talking with Stalin, and when asked about the general secretary's state of health, he answered simply, as if it were clearly evident: paranoia. The word proved fatal for Bechterev. He didn't live long after pronouncing it. He was poisoned. Stalin was terribly afraid the diagnosis would become known, that everyone would think him mentally ill, which would spell the end of his career. A lunatic cannot be tolerated as head of state. But was it known that he was not mentally fit? Of course. Who was the first to say this openly? After Stalin's death, this was publicly announced by Khrushchev. He said, "What do you expect? Can't you understand? There was a madman on the throne."
The cerebral hemorrhage that killed Stalin struck him down in this room, where he was later found lying on the floor. This is the official explanation. There are unofficial versions as well. Most of them identify Lavrenti Beria as organizer of the Stalin death plot. To Beria and the rest of Stalin's milieu, it was obvious that Stalin was readying another bloody purge of the party. Having survived many such purges, they were quick to spot the clues. Already, Stalin's bodyguard had been replaced with Beria's own men. Khrushchev recalled that on February the 28th, 1953, after a drinking bout, they all went home, leaving Stalin in his country villa. When he then collapsed, no one dared enter the room, and he lay where he fell for 12 hours. Stalin's daughter recalled that when she arrived, unfamiliar doctors were fussing around her father, whose lips were covered in bloody foam, a sign of poisoning. Later, Beria told Molotov, "I saved all of you from him." From his coffin, Stalin continued to dispense death. Hundreds of mourners were trampled or suffocated in the crush of humanity that squeezed into central Moscow to witness his funeral. Stalin was a colossus of violence, the greatest serial killer who ever lived. Today,
controversial personality of all those I have known.
In the Republic of Georgia, beneath the towering snow peaks, in the town of Gori, stands the last remaining monument to Joseph Stalin. A pavilion shelters the little house where he was born. In this room and bed. In the Georgia of 1879, an outlying province of the Russian Empire, whose warm, rustic simplicity is preserved in the paintings of Nico Pirosmani. Like the woman pictured here, Stalin's mother has borne 3 sons. Only Joseph survives infancy. Stalin's mother is a laundress on the estate of the wealthy merchant Ignatashvili. Her husband, Vissarion Djugashvili, is a cobbler. Death comes, as it must to all men, to Joseph Stalin on March the 5th, 1953, in his 74th year. His nation is plunged into mourning. Stalin had seemed immortal. His body is brought to the mausoleum, the great burial vault on Red Square, sanctum sanctorum of the communist world, and placed next to the body of Lenin, founder of the party and the state. 8 years later, on a rainy October night, Stalin's body is secretly removed from its sarcophagus, placed in a rough wooden box, taken to a newly dug grave by the Kremlin wall and hastily reburied without ceremony. This man who left so great a footprint on 20th century history, can he be explained? Averil Harriman, U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union.
Stalin remains for me the most incomprehensible, mysterious, and...
but will keep his mother hidden in this house. Her walls hung with cherished photographs. Her life carefully monitored. You old whore will be one of Stalin's names for her. When his mother dies, Stalin will send Lavrenti Beria, head of his secret police, to represent him. Beria's men will act as mourners at her funeral. She had wanted her son to become a priest. Young Stalin attends church school, his tuition revealingly paid for by Ignatashvili. Then theological seminary at the Georgian capital, Tiflis. At the seminary, he's also a drunk and a wife and child beater. Vissarion Djugashvili vanishes one day. In later years, this photo is displayed in the Gory Museum as that of Stalin's father. Sent to Stalin for confirmation, it is not returned. Rumor has it that Stalin's actual father is his mother's employer, Ignatashvili. Village gossips also credit a general and a member of the Tsar's family. Both have been dinner guests of Ignatashvili. Young Joseph, his mother a scarlet woman, his parentage in doubt, is taunted by other children and shunned by the village. It twists and hardens him. Later, Stalin will be pictured as a loving son,